You're listening to the REI Clarity Podcast, the show that guides you from confusion to clarity and sets you on the path to financial freedom faster. Learn how to grow your portfolio the right way with your host, REI superhero and co-founder of Shine Insurance, Jeremy Goodrich.
Hey, this is Jeremy Goodrich, owner of Shine Insurance and your host for the REI Clarity Podcast. Since this is the first episode, let's lay out the structure of the show. The goal of your real estate investing journey is to build wealth. The purpose of this show is to get you clarity. No shortcuts, no magic bullets, just a strategy that combines education and experience. We'll do that with alternating episodes. One will be an interview with a guest who brings experience and knowledge to the table. The next will apply that guest's experience to the REI Clarity Framework. I'll lay out that framework in the next episode. So let's get right to the conversation with our first guest. I'm super excited to have him on the show. When I think of the investor I want to be, his face shows up in my brain. So I want him to be the first guest for a couple of reasons. First, because the topic we're digging into today is at the foundation of real estate investing, and he knows a ton about it. Secondly, I simply see him as one of the smartest investors I know. So Mark Kelwaski, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
So can you start out by just telling us how you got started in real estate investing?
Yeah, so originally from the Bloomington area, and with my wife and I, we were there, and she had always said, we should do this real estate investing thing. Her grandparents made a living in real estate, and I had always kind of said, I'm not sure about it, and was always concerned that I'd have to move for my job, and that I really want to have, a rental property in a town that I didn't live anymore. So I kind of, put her on the back burner for a while, and after a couple of years, we continued to stay in Bloomington, and started to look towards a family and said, all right, let's maybe try this. We went at it. We bought our first, 1-unit rental. It was a townhouse. And then from there, I was hooked, right? My wife will always tell you she was pushing for me to own, thinking maybe let's do 2 or 3 units. And over the next 5 years, we went up to 130. So far exceeding her expectations there. Probably had to calm her down a few times and say, yes, this is the right thing. And, overall, her and I are on this journey together, and we've loved it. It's been a great little kind of side business that we get to run together.
So you've gone from 1 unit to 130 in such a short period of time. It's neat to see. Can you describe a little bit about your strategy and how if you teamed up with other people, or how you built this to be able to scale so quickly?
So from a strategy standpoint, first just kind of got in and wanted to try it. But, from there, I've always said, I'm not biased where my money comes from. That being said,
Yeah.
I primarily is looking now for, 4 to 80 unit properties that are located in Indiana. My goal is to find properties that are currently cash flowing. There's a lot of different ways that you can play in the real estate market, which is one of the things that I find fascinating, right? Whether it's you want to do flips, you want to find underutilized properties that are, almost dormant that you've got to do and fix up, or some very high end, kind of safe things. So I've always looked for properties that are already cash flowing, but then an area that I can find some benefit that I can bring. What synergy, what operating mechanism do I have that can take that current property that's already producing cash and be able to extract a greater value out of it?
So what would be an example? Like what's an example of a purchase you've made where you saw that value, it was already cash flowing, but you saw what you could bring?
So there's been quite a few there. I would say, in the beginning, some of the properties that I looked at, I was able to take out the property management expense because I was doing that myself, right? When I first started, I wanted to roll up my sleeves and learn this. As I've moved on, and we'll probably discuss, right? I use a property manager and I have to factor that in. But that's an advantage where, someone now that may only own 2 units and think, how could I compete with someone who's at a larger scale? If you're looking to roll up your sleeves and learn those things, that's 6, 7, 8% of your, 10% of your revenue that you're keeping in your pocket. Yes, it is some work that you have to do. Yeah. But if you're considering that's an education for you, you're going to evaluate a property and see a little bit more return in your pocket than I am, because I'm going to have to, pay for that property manager.
Yeah. So when did you make the switch from managing your own properties to bringing on a property manager?
We bought that first townhouse and then quickly said, wow, this thing looks good. Let's do this again. So we bought a second townhouse. It was pretty easy managing those. And then I went in and bought my first multifamily property. It was 2 3-bedroom apartments upstairs. And then on the main floor and in the basement were 4 commercial properties. So as I did that, I continued to manage, and that brought me in a lot of experience. And when I went beyond that is when I said, okay, now I'm ready to start to have a property manager pay for some of the things that they bring and allow me to free up some of my time for other aspects.
Obviously, the cash flow can change when you bring in that property manager and the extra 8% or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. You were able to buy bigger multifamilies, see a better return, and then that made sense why the property manager would come in at that point.
Correct. And I think too, when you look at larger units, so as I've mentioned there that we're over 100, all of our other units that we've purchased are multifamily. Our smallest property outside of that we have bought has been 5 units. We've bought all the way up to 60. So when you're competing on that scale, there's probably not too many people that are saying that I'm going to be an owner operator myself. I believe most of them are using a property manager. That didn't seem to be as much of a disadvantage. But there was, other things that we've done and looked at of going in and being critical of the expenses and seeing, where could we contract different services, given that we've got multiple properties. Can I hire one contract that, puts everything under there, even to the insurance side, right? Working with you as we have grown, the insurance company has kind of gotten to know who we are, sees that we've got a bigger portfolio, looks at our risk a little bit different, and we can get just, a little bit better in some areas, and all of that little bit adds up.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you grow, the setup, the structure of the contract, whether it's insurance or property management or whatever, when you've got volume, you can see better numbers, and that makes everything look better, right?
Yep.
Cool. I want to dig into this idea, and you just kind of went there, so I'm going to continue that conversation. The idea of advisors and mentors. So I think a lot of property investors are kind of on their own. You're not a business owner in the same way, the same structure as a lot of businesses. It's a little bit less upfront, probably a little smaller actual team, but you use a lot of advisors and mentors. So I wonder for you, as you look at those folks in the structure of what you do, what roles, I'm not really asking for names, I'm just like, what roles have you found to be the most valuable in making good decisions as an investor?
Yeah, so I think, I can probably take that into 2 parts, right? So one's going to be more of a mentor, advisor, someone that I'm not necessarily partnered with, but taking some advice. And then I've also kind of got my team, right? People that, are working with me on my property. So from a mentor and advisor perspective, I certainly reached out to some owners as I was going through this. Was able to talk with my wife's family who had done this for a while. But a lot of it was, some self-education. I'm also very blessed, right? I went to Indiana University School of Business, so I have some business background. Mm-hmm. I've worked in the pharmaceutical industry now for 15 years, right? This weekend was my 15-year graduating from Indiana. So,
wow.
But working in the business world and the type of work that I've done within pharmaceuticals, I've been interacting with customers and negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts, et cetera.
Yeah.
And that has helped me to be comfortable in the area, which maybe, others would not have been.
That makes total sense. So having mentors, you mentioned really family members, who were more of a mentor scenario, but also just having an education. Mm-hmm. And I think I was talking with another investor a couple of days ago, and he was saying that education provides the base and experience provides the growth.
Yes.
And I thought that was a really nice way to think about it. Like if education can get you so far, but there's no replacement for actually experiencing your first 80 unit buy or whatever it is. And so that's kind of what you're saying too, that you are able to be educated. You have a background, which has made that process much smoother and easier for you. But I would imagine, and maybe I'm putting words into your mouth, but experience adds on top of that education. Is that fair to say?
Yes, 100%. I think with each purchase that I've been able to acquire, I've learned a lot, the management of it. I've spent time talking with the seller, right? Often these are properties that are already being run as an investment property. Mm-hmm. And right, there's a seller. A couple of the properties I bought have been from gentlemen who are, in their retirement age, or they're sunsetting, right? They're getting rid of properties, and was able to just sit down and talk with them and say, how did you come about this property? What have been your challenges? What would you do going forward? And everyone has been very open to discuss that. As I've gotten more involved and started to build a network, I've talked with other owners, and we all kind of, share information. The great thing is there's a lot of real estate out there, so much that we're not really competing with each other. Yes, Bloomington's a small town, and if something comes up, there might be a few people that are going after it. But for the most part, we can kind of talk about, hey, I'm looking at this property. What do you think? I had one that was similar. This is what I did. And there's a lot of advantages from that.
Yeah, I remember one deal where I watched you navigate just like you were describing. You were talking with the owner.
Mm-hmm.
The owner, I think, had built it themselves, didn't have any mortgage on it, and was sunsetting and was thinking about moving on from the property. And you did exactly what you described, which was just engage with that person, come to understand things. And the deal ended up happening. One of the things in the middle of that, if I remember correctly, is that he didn't have flood insurance because he didn't need it because he didn't have a mortgage. And we had to navigate what could have been an incredibly expensive element of that property, which was flood insurance, which he had no knowledge of because he didn't have to have it because there wasn't a lender involved in that situation, right?
Yep. And that's just, an area, again, of expertise that I've now been on the website, looked at the FEMA maps, understand what's in the 1% floodplain, the 100-year, 500-year, and kind of dug through all of that. And just as, an extra piece of information that I now have when I'm analyzing another property that helps me.
Hey, it's Jeremy putting my ad hat on right now. As you know, my primary connection with the investment property world, my zone of genius, is investment property insurance. I am the REI insurance guy. Our team at Shine Insurance takes care of investors from all walks and all strategies. If you need insurance for your portfolio, and of course you do, I'm offering a free one-on-one call just for REI Clarity listeners. On that call, we'll chat through your scenario, and I'll share insights and thoughts on how to get your insurance right and whether Shine is a good fit for you. No pressure, no slimy sales, anything. Just me on the phone sharing my insights. To book that call, go to shineinsurance.com/REI Clarity. That's shineinsurance.com/REI Clarity. Let's dig into one part of your strategy that we can clarify for our listeners. So I guess let's start, and maybe this is too simple, but how would you describe a Proforma when you're working through it?
Proforma to me is a standardized way of measuring the output of a property, right? There's a lot of different ones out there if you Google search, and I don't think there's one that's necessarily better than the other, but you need to be able to understand it. But for me, a Proforma is going to take the past history of the property, or what you feel will be the history going forward, from both a purchase price, what the income, what your expenses are going to be, and you need to be detailed and make sure you have that figured out. And at the end of the day, it's going to run some math and say, here's how we look at this property from a cash perspective, from a cap rate, etc. And I'm a spreadsheets guy, and I've always kind of lived by that. It kind of helps me take some of the emotion out of the property and say, let's put the facts and details down and let's run the numbers and see if it's passing my threshold of, is this an interest or is this a pass?
Absolutely. So there's hundreds of options out there. BiggerPockets on their own probably has 10 calculators or Proformas in there. When you're looking at these, are there certain elements that you feel are important to have or include in a Proforma?
You want to be able to have it detailed enough that you can break down the different areas. I've built one myself, just maybe because it's my personality that I wanted to do it myself and call the different headers, what I have. But I think, overall, it's making sure that you're doing your correct due diligence upfront. How you bucket the money, right? Do you take utilities and landscaping and you put that in the same bucket, or you line item out? That's for your choice there. But at the end of the day, have you sat down and thought about, let me look at the tax bill. Let me go back and see, is that an area that's getting ready to be annexed into the city? And so in 2 years, the taxes are going to be higher, right?
Right?
Management fee. What size is this property? What is my property manager going to be asking for, right? Are they asking for not only a certain management fee, but then every time they place a new tenant, right? Is there a fee for that? Going through and asking all of those detailed questions and kind of really in your mind walking through, what is it that this property is currently producing? What can I do? And often when I do my Proformas, I try and set up what are the actuals? I want the actual last 12 months.
Yeah.
What was the rent? What was the expenses? And then I'll put you know what, if I got a little bit of the Mark Kelwaski touch and could improve this and decrease this, what could it be?
Yeah.
And I don't purchase based off of what I think.
Yeah.
I purchase off of today, but it is nice to go, this property also has this upside.
In a lot of sellers' disclosures, they put a fair amount of this information that you just described, actual numbers. Do you find that to be correct most often, or do you feel like part of how you can find those numbers is building that relationship with the seller?
Building the relationship with the seller, and you need to ask for actuals. There are sometimes in the disclosure it's there. You need to be careful. Sometimes they'll say this is based off of market rent, what we believe you could get. And I said, no, I want, actuals from the past. And I have a couple step, process that I use for my Proforma, or as I like to call them, my Monopoly cards. I grew up as a Monopoly fan, and it never dawned on me in the beginning until I started showing this to my friends, and they all said, those look just like Monopoly cards.
They do. I'm looking at the one you created right now in front of me, and it does. I'd never really thought of that before, but you're exactly right. It totally does.
So when we're all out there trying to scour for deals, right? Who's going to be the one that gets the lead? Whether it's listed on the MLS, or I've heard of a pocket listing, or, a realtor's bringing me some stuff. Mm-hmm. When I first get a property, I'm going to put it into my Monopoly card, and it's going to be based off of, what do I think, right? I can usually check taxes on the GIS. Mm-hmm. I kind of have some rules of thumb of, what it would be for utilities, et cetera, repairs. I've got enough properties I can kind of look to see what I'm paying for insurance for other things that are similar. Mm-hmm. And I fill that out. And if from there, the numbers look promising, maybe not even quite to my threshold, but it looks like that it pans out, that's when I then engage and will reach out with the broker and say, I'm interested in this property. I've got some specific questions, right? And then ask for actuals. And there's been times that that's not provided. And I'll just say, I'm looking forward to place a contract. Can I get the trailing 12 months? And very often, almost always, that they'll provide that data.
And so it's a timing thing too, which so many things are, right? Like if you're going out and asking the seller or the broker for a bunch of information over and over again on stuff that you're not necessarily sure you're feeling confident about making an offer, that may not go so well. Mm-hmm. But if you have the capacity and knowledge to dig for information yourself, to get to the point where you understand whether it makes sense to take that next leap of really getting true information. That's kind of what I'm hearing from you, and I think that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Hey there, Jeremy here. As you know, my primary connection with the investment property world, my superpower, is investment property insurance. I am the REI insurance guy. One of the things investment property clients at Shine Insurance love is the way we organize and explain insurance. We make it simple. There's a central document we use to do that, and I'd like to share that with you along with a complete guide to using it. The organizer and the complete guide to investment property insurance are totally free. You can find them at shineinsurance.com/REI Clarity. That's shineinsurance.com/REI Clarity. Are there any lines on the Proformas that you pay more attention to? There's videos out there, pay attention to this line, make sure your cap rate is this number. Are there specific things on what you look at that if it's off, it's just a no?
Repairs is something that you want to try and dig into. And I kind of have mine lumped in all together as one big thing of repairs. I do some more due diligence behind it, but that's something that you want to be careful with because, on one aspect, if you can get a property that has had very low repairs, that equals low expenses, more money in my pocket. Mm-hmm. Wow, this is great. But on the other hand, you have to make sure, is that because of deferred maintenance? And that when you get this property, you have, a jalopy, right? I've got a furnace that has just, barely been eking by. Instead of fixing it the right way, they just put little patches on it, right? They've not gone in and painted in a long time. So that's not, an expense there. So it's one that you want to be careful. You don't necessarily want a property that has low repairs. You don't want one that has high, but each have their advantages. And if you understand what that's doing to the property and what you expect to go forward, right? That you're going to increase. And some of our properties that we've bought have been a little on the rough edge, we'll say. I've not bought completely dilapidated, but some of these, they're a little rough, and we'll go in and say, what, we know that we're going to spend a little more, right? Yeah. We're going to have a high quality product. We're going to turn these, but in doing that, we think that we can take the average rent, which is $750 per unit, we can get that to $850.
Yeah.
And then doing a lot of verifying, right? You need to be comfortable in your market to know what other units in that area are getting, right? If it's a fixed up unit, what can it be? And so as much time as I spend looking for deals, I'm on apartments.com or Zillow or, the various things looking at what are other units renting for.
Yeah.
And, one other, I guess maybe a little tip that I'll give here is, particularly if you're buying maybe like a one-off townhouse and you're wondering, what could I get this to rent? As we did that, I would always walk the neighborhood, get out of your car, take a walk. You can see more things. It's slower and walk by someone and they're walking their dog and say, excuse me, do you rent around here? Yes. Do you mind telling me what do you pay for rent? Oh, I paid $900. And, that's good. Or, okay. People will freely give you that information. And it was very valuable for me in the beginning to get a couple more data points of, what is that realistically going to be rented for in this exact neighborhood.
That's really cool. And so that's another example of you kind of boots on the grounding it, finding ways to connect with other people in a variety of different scenarios. Maybe that's connecting with the seller and hearing their real story. Maybe that's connecting with other folks in the neighborhood to know if the townhouse you're thinking about purchasing is going to rent for what you think it will. And that's what you've done, among many, many other things, to find success deciding which properties to invest in.
Yep.
So the last section of our conversation is called 3 Steps to Clarity. What are 3 steps that you think are the best? And obviously there's an open interpretation of this, but the best things you can do to be successful investing in properties?
So I would say solid deal analysis, right? We just spent some time talking there. It's the area that I think I bring a lot of value to. So maybe I put some extra emphasis, but before you buy a property, you've got to be able to analyze it, and that area to predict is going to be important. So I think you need to be able to understand the inputs and outputs of that Proforma and the properties that you're looking at, so that when you can not only analyze a deal, but then when you find one that meets your, metric, that you're able to move forward. So I would say that would be the first step, right? You got to be able to find those properties and make that decisive decision. Because I know there's a lot of people that hem and haw, right? Is this the right thing to go or not? And good or bad, I'm a very decisive person, right? I found that I am not afraid to take action. And so I've been able to kind of, go over that step.
Well, and you get input, like you've just described over this conversation, that the fact that you create a scenario for yourself that makes it easy to make a decision, and that's all about data and information so that you can make a smart decision. And that's just what I would add to what you just said there.
The second one I would say probably is going to be defined operating mechanisms, either for the processes that you perform or the functions, of your team members. So now that I've analyzed the deal and I've bought it, right, to kind of get that good portfolio moving forward is, what is it that you do, right? You need to know, how is it that work orders are handled? How are annual rent increases? Who's handling paying the property taxes? Who's doing, et cetera? And it may be all you. And if it's you, that's great. But then, how do you handle it? Do you have a certain inbox of flow system? If you're working with multiple partners that I have, right? I've got 5 or 6 LLCs that these properties are kind of grouped under. Who's doing what of those handoffs? How do I know that my property manager is doing this and that I'm not doing a repeat, but that neither of us are missing it?
So workflows.
Yep.
Even if it's just you starting to build those structured workflows so that when you are ready to scale and when you can pull the trigger on a bigger, multifamily or whatever, that you've got the structures and systems in place. So workflows, I think, for any business, but definitely for the real estate investing as well.
And I would say for any of those individuals out there that are, on their own and they're thinking of buying just a couple of units, my wife used to laugh at me that I would sit right in front of my computer, and I really see it that I was running a company, and sometimes I would wear my marketing hat, right? How am I going to market this property? Here's my operations hat of how am I going to execute? And then I would say, here's my finance, and think about all of those distinct areas. And I had a plan for each of those, and that was very helpful.
Well, and that's true. I think investing doesn't feel like a business sometimes. And so it can make you maybe lax in these things that, as a business owner myself, I have to have, or things won't work. But it very much is a business. You started this conversation by saying you don't care where your money comes from, and this is as much a business as anything else. And that's a key element. Right. Okay, so workflows are the second one. And what's the third? So
the third one that I would reflect back and look on is to build that network to help you find both sellers and buyers. So it's like, again, just build on these 3. When I first started, I was doing analysis to find deals. I was doing my mechanisms. And now that I've got, some additional properties, I spend a lot of my time trying to talk with other individuals. And it's can't be understated that talking to a lot of people and telling them what you do, you never know that when someone says, my uncle is getting ready to sell something. Great. I love it. Or I share with my insurance agent that I do, real estate property and how much I have passion for it and what I look for. And I would think that if you're talking to one of your customers that is exiting,
Absolutely.
and they're saying, yeah, I'm thinking about getting rid of these, right?
Yeah.
My name's going to pop in your mind and go, maybe I should shoot Mark just hey, are you curious in this? You don't have to play any other part in the deal, but you helped connect us. And so I've got a group of, brokers that we use and try and keep in touch with, and they're always trying to loop us. But there's other members within, the community that I'm kind of, constantly talking to, making sure, seeing if they have their hands in a lot of areas that we're all kind of sharing some information because it's very valuable. And we found, quite a few of our deals more recently that have been kind of through those back channel networks.
That's awesome. So number one, understand the deal you're getting into by understanding the information there. Number two, have workflows in place for the things that you're going to do. Run your business like a business because it is. And number three, relationships, knowing people. And if it's wearing a t-shirt that says I buy houses or knowing people who, are in the middle of those spaces, make sure that your name is one of the first names that comes up when someone knows a property is potentially up for sale. Do I have that?
You got it.
Cool. Well, that is it. Any last thoughts you want to share with our audience?
I just hope that if anyone's, out there trying to do what we've done, that you enjoy it as much that I have and have learned quite a bit. And I would just say, always feel free to reach out there and ask people and talk. There's a lot of resources and there's no one, shot way of doing it. There's a lot of different, avenues. But I think if you take your time and you educate and you set your criteria, and then when you see an opportunity that meets it, you move forward, that overall you'll find yourself successful. And the end goal is to, as I said, learn a lot about this, but, build up some passive income and come up with a plan to maybe pass that on down to future generations.
Absolutely. Well, Mark, thank you so much for being willing to come on the show, being our first guest. I just have appreciated being a part of your journey and watching you go on this journey. And it's so great. And I think the information that you provided today is going to be super helpful to anybody who listens to it. So thank you for being willing to share on our show today.
Thank you. And thanks for setting this up. I think it's going to be great to be able to share these and hear other people's comments and kind of help build this community even further. Thanks.
Thank you. Special thanks to Mark Kelwaski for taking the time to share his insights. It's been inspiring to watch his growth over the past few years. Who do you know who needs to hear this podcast? Who's that friend dreaming of buying their first multifamily? Who were you just talking to about investing in real estate? Grab your phone and send them this episode. Let's help everyone level up. We read every single review, so tell us what you liked and what you want to learn. Give us 5 stars while you're at it. That helps folks find us better. And finally, join us in the REI Clarity Facebook group. It is the place to get clarity, make connections that lead to cash flow, and implement the system and strategies we talk about here. Just search REI Clarity on Facebook and look for the gold logo. See you there, and we'll catch you in the next episode.